Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be watching us from. Today we have got a panel discussion on a topic that I recently ran into. Very, very interesting indeed. So please sit down, get comfortable, grab a snack, grab a drink, and join us on this journey where we are going to talk about the similarities between religion and Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is obviously when it's a syndrome that's classified by people who are taken hostage who eventually end up developing sympathies for their captors. So yes, I was actually, when I was reading through the signs and the diagnoses of it, I said to myself, damn, I've heard this before. Right, so let's get the show on the road. Ahoy! How are you guys doing? Let's go around clockwise and just introduce ourselves. My name is Dean. I am from South Africa. I am an atheist. I run some of the local Atheist Republic groups in South Africa. Over to you, Bryce.
I'm Bryce. I am also an atheist. I show up here from time to time when invited to give thoughts, and I don't like to prop myself up as having an expertise in anything, so I'm just a guy with opinions.
You are too modest. Tersia?
I am a fellow South African Dean. You will know exactly what that means. Bryce, it's lovely to see you. We had a chat on Free Thought Hour some months ago now, I think. It's nice to see you. Alvina, my sister, the goddess of atheism. I am also, like Bryce, I'm an expert in nothing. I am just interested and extremely curious. And I must say that I'm a former believer. The first 40 years of my life I spent devoted to the church, to Jesus Christ. And then I read the Bible for myself. And now I'm an atheist activist. Proud to be associated with all of you people. And over to Alvina.
Awesome. My name is Alvina Gachugu. Great to see you again, Tersia. Just meeting you now, Bryce. And as all of you have said, I'm also here just to learn as much as I can every day. I'm not an expert in anything, but I'm always open to learning. I'm an ex-JW, which means ex-Jehovah's Witness. So yeah, currently an atheist from 2022. Yeah, up to now.
You're a newbie.
I know. That
newly
fire,
godless.
that fire is burning red hot still, Tersia.
And seeing as you're coming out of Jehovah's Witnesses, I hope that everything is okay in your social sphere, because that could have some significant consequences that's different from other religions. So hopefully you're in a good place and you have some sort of community. If not, we are proud to be your new community.
We're here. Here's the community. Nobody talks to me anymore, but we're here and we're talking.
Maybe, if I may, I would like to begin the conversation about Stockholm Syndrome by linking to my atheist goddess Alvina to my left, because I think the JWs is a better example of what we might call Stockholm Syndrome than many other religions, because it's highly coercive. So for those who don't know, okay, guys, I'm a teacher, right? So I don't know if that's good or bad, but my teacher persona kicks in at the most unusual and unwanted times. But for those in our audience who don't know, Stockholm Syndrome, and please, Dean, you've done some reading, I'm going off my memory here, but Stockholm Syndrome was named for the heiress Patty Hearst, who was kidnapped. And I don't know whether she was kidnapped in Sweden and she was held in Stockholm, but she actually developed a romantic relationship with her kidnappers. So Patty Hearst, her father, was a media magnate in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where the term Stockholm syndrome actually comes from. That's just the teacher in me kicking in to give the actual information. But
that's an important piece of information that I'm glad we started with.
so it is actually a real phenomenon, and I think it's people who studied it initially didn't link it to religion, but as people of people who left the faith or deconstructed became more open about it, the parallels between God and a kidnapper became more clear. And I want to just shift, if you don't mind, Alvina. I think the JWs in particular, they are a good example of psychological kidnapping, because it's isolated, so you only have contact with fellow JWs. You're not allowed to have contact with anybody else. You're not allowed to celebrate birthdays, Christmas. You're not allowed to go participate in anything nationalistic. You're not allowed to sing the national anthem of your country, birthdays, Christmas, like I said. So that keeping the mind captive, I think that's the parallel between Stockholm syndrome and religion. So, Alvina, can you talk to us about that?
True, Tarsa. It's very isolating, because I remember even growing up, you can't, first of all, you can't marry someone who's not a Jehovah's Witness as well. And if you're interacting with other people, you're mostly doing it when you're preaching to them, trying to get them to the truth. So they really knew how to do that. I remember the first time I celebrated my birthday, I was in my 20s, like that's the first time, and it felt so great, because all my life I couldn't even eat birthday cakes from friends, didn't participate in anything religious or anything non-religious, so you're just stuck in this in between. So you have no one else to turn to but the JW community. And if you start asking questions, you're told to just check the jw.org. That was, I don't want to promote them, to check their website. So it is a great example of psychological kidnapping, because anything small, you're just told to turn to the script. Even the Bible was different, the New World Translation. Like everything was just exclusive, making you feel like this VIP. So you're just stuck in this cult, which we couldn't call it at the time. But later on, I was like, yeah, this is a cult.
So if I just want to move to Bryce. Sorry, and please, guys, I think I'm the oldest here, and I'm the only teacher, so you've got to just shut me down if I take over, Dean. But if I remember correctly, Bryce, you're a veteran. You were in the army, and I want to ask you about that, because coming from the armed forces, I think there's two ways of looking at this. You could, if you capture an enemy soldier, you interrogate them. There's this thing where you have good cop, bad cop, and I can see that where you want to get information from somebody, you want them to trust you, because you want to swing them over to your side. And I think God is at the same time, in one persona, one imaginary persona, he's at the same time good cop, bad cop, good soldier, bad soldier. So you have the one who does, if I'm thinking of Nazi Germany, and I've done a lot of reading about spies who were caught, like the French resistance. So you'd have the Nazi officer who beats the bejesus out of you to get information. And then he sends somebody in to give you some comfort and it's not so bad. As a former as a veteran who was in the army, do you think there are any parallels psychologically also to what religion does? It's not exactly Stockholm syndrome, because I mean you weren't kidnapped to join the army, but there's this thing of good cop, bad cop, and I think the persona of a kidnapper could be exactly the same, because there's this constant tension between do what I want you to do because I want something from you, and if you do the right thing, you're not in trouble. Could you speak to that a little, Bryce?
So first of all, just to correct you slightly, I was actually in the United States Air Force, so just gotta give a shout out to my branch. But this is interesting because you mentioned interrogation, and I was in the military from the period of 1998 to 2018. So this is that was a period of peacetime for a couple of years, and then the war in Afghanistan, and then the war in Iraq, right? And then all throughout the Guantanamo Bay situation. And so there was a lot of controversy at that time with what the US military does to capture insurgents, is what we call them, because it wasn't really a war, right? There was no war declared between countries. We were fighting the war on terror, which is not a real thing, but it's more of a conceptual thing. So when we captured these insurgents or suspected insurgents, we didn't know who they were and we needed to interrogate them for information. There was a lot of controversy at the time about the methods used to do that. And we know that waterboarding became publicized during this era, and different forms of what we now identify as torture, right? I don't know why I did quote marks there. It's torture. Waterboarding is torture. It just is. But we were doing that. And the problem with that is, these are the same type of methods that enemy nations have done throughout history, Japan, Germany. We're not supposed to do that. We, as in the United States, and really our allies, Western allies, are not supposed to behave that way, because we are supposed to follow the laws of armed conflict and the Geneva Conventions and these different rules that we've agreed to abide by for a number of reasons, not just to give us the moral high ground, but because we're trying to set the example for other people. And also, when it comes to interrogation specifically, and psychologists have studied this, and people in the military have studied this. They study this at the Pentagon. Torture is not a good method of extracting information. You know, when you're doing interrogation, sometimes fear tactics can be used. You can use different manipulative tactics to get someone to reveal more information. But fear and the threat of pain or death is not really a good way to get information. If you're looking for something that's true, if you're looking for the true information, that's not how you want to do it, because someone who's under the duress of torture will tell you whatever they think you want to hear, whether it's true or not. And we know that from, people will just say whatever they think you want to hear to make it stop. So it's really kind of ineffective.
Oh my God, I feel like I'm in church again. I was just saying anything that they want to hear.
And and that kind of ties into Stockholm syndrome a little bit as well, because there comes a point after so long where the person might actually even believe what they're saying, even if it's not true, So that wasn't a direct answer to your question, but as far as do I see parallels there, kind of. I see parallels with like the nations or the organizations, I should say, terrorist regimes, whatever, who still use that as a method of interrogation or as a method of coercion. I do see parallels between them and what religion kind of does. I think maybe the only tangible difference is a person who's under duress, who's been kidnapped or whatever, they actually have physical direct interaction with the threat. They know that there's a threat there. There is literally a gun to their head. Religion is more of an idea. It's something that you've been taught. People have instilled this fear in you. There's no substance there, at least that you can detect. You haven't seen any evidence of this gun or of the person holding the gun. You've just been told that you've been fed this idea. There's a gun to your head, so watch what you do. And I would say that that's probably the real difference. And in that case, you're listening to people speaking on behalf of the gunman rather than the gunman himself.
So Dean, I want to move over to you, but before I do that, as a mother who's raised young children to semi-adulthood, and as a teacher, that is the key difference. If we talk about Stockholm syndrome, you have to get Christian or beliefs, religions, have to get them while they're young. Because when you kidnap somebody, they know there's a real person, and your continued existence is dependent on the whims of the kidnapper, right? So you know that as long as you keep this kidnapper happy, and as long as you do what they want you to do, you have a better chance of surviving. And that is our primal instinct, to survive as biological beings. So what religion does, in a very subversive and smart psychological way, it kidnaps
Sly.
you.
You can say sly, Tersia.
Can I say sly? Well,
because they are sneaky and sly and slimy and slippery all in one.
It works particularly well if it gets you while you're young, so while your brain and your frontal lobes and your thinking is still forming. And the other type of kidnapping that happens is when you're vulnerable, when you in your sort of late teens, when you're going through all sorts of issues. You've just lost your first boyfriend, you realize that you are gay, and you're going through puberty and you're struggling to fit in. You're vulnerable, and then they catch you and they convince you. So religion convinces you that you have an eternal soul, which I'm not convinced of, and then that you have to the continued existence in a happy place of your soul is dependent on this God, who's at the same time good cop and bad cop, because as long as you keep him happy, you should be fine. But the thing is, just like with, I mean, a personality, if you're a kidnapper, you're a criminal. You have, I don't think you can be all there. So there's some unpredictability. You never know what that kidnapper is going to do, and it's very much the same with gods. You never know. You never know whether you're saved. I mean, I was a Christian. I was a believer. I was baptized. I grew up in the church, but there's always a thing of, you can't ever be 100% sure, yes, I'm going to heaven, because, what, you never know. And I think the one parallel that I see between religion and Stockholm syndrome is that element of unpredictability, where you're constantly on edge because you never know what's going to happen. And so, Dean, I want to hear your views on that. But Bryce, I want to get back to the army. Oh no, sorry, not the army. You were not in the army. You were in the Air Force. That's different. my sincerest apologies. It's a very important point. But is there something similar to that in an organization that is very hierarchical, where you are not all, I can't imagine, whatever position you are in, that anybody has all the information at any point. Because I mean, that's just foolish, because it could be actually dangerous. And I think that element of insecurity, and you never fully in control. And I think that's the one thing that religion does best, to convince us that you are not in control, but there's this general, the ultimate kidnapper who is in control.
That's the entire basis for Alcoholics Anonymous also, by the way. But we'll talk about that later. Go ahead, Dean.
Right. I think it's, I just want to be mindful of the clock as well. And I can sense that we are going to, we'll go down a rabbit trail here. So
I'll answer your question, Tersia, at the end. We'll come back after we go through the slide.
Got that. Yes,
so,
sir. General Air Force.
Yeah. Wes, if you can throw those slides up for us. So, I went through, I did a bit of research, to try and identify what the actual reasons are that people, that I want to make this comparison between Stockholm Syndrome and religious belief. But first of all, let's just have a look at, this is my absolute favorite verse in the Bible. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put away the ways of childhood behind me. So put away those childish things and think for yourself. There's a couple of infographics just with regards to the Bible that I want to show you guys. So the red is is the negative sentiment. This is a sentiment analysis graph. So the red is the negative sentiment, and the black is obviously the positive sentiment. This was done by a computer algorithm, so take it for what it is. There's an awful lot of bad in there with the good. And if you look at the average sentiment across the book, when God started off, he was very angry. He only mellowed out a little bit in his, towards the New Testament. That's where the sentiment got a little bit better. And then if you compare as well the sentiments within the Bible to, for example, the Quran, there's an eerie similarity between the themes. So I don't know, it must be something in the Middle Eastern air or something that, just makes God angry or works on his nerves. So let's have a look at these 10 items. So firstly, there is this fear of punishment or fear of divine punishment that's built into it. So just as hostages may develop compliance to avoid harm, believers do exactly the same thing. They comply to religious doctrines out of fear of divine retribution rather than a general faith or an agreement with those teachings. Can we think of a couple of examples?
Dean, I'm so sorry, but I have to say this, and I have to interrupt you here.
Yep.
As a child, I remember in the Bible that I grew up with, the phrase was, he was a God-fearing person. And I always wondered about, that's the actual terminology. You have to be God-fearing. You have to fear God.
Yeah.
It's there. It's not hidden. You have to be a God-fearing person equals somebody who believes. So the fear element is very explicitly built into religion.
Mm-hmm. It's true, and then the irony is that the thing is, I think it was in one of Hitchens's talks or debates or something where he brought up this point where he said to have to fear something that you are also required to love is the essence of masochism or something along those lines. And
it's also false. It's not really something that happens. You cannot compel love through fear. It's so that it's this kind of misunderstanding of the people who wrote that obviously didn't know how the human mind works, right? This is centuries before any kind of psychological understanding of the rational mind. But that's not how love happens. Love is an organic thing that happens naturally. Usually, fear, we can act as though we love someone through fear, but that's not really love. That's just obedience, right? And so we're replacing the word obedience with love, but that's not really what it is.
Yeah. And
also, Dean, by the way, you questioned why the Quran was so similar to the Bible in terms of how, the positive versus the negative, and if it was something in the Middle East. Remember that the Quran is basically a copy off of the Bible. Islam looked at what Christianity had done and kind of did the same thing, just as Christianity kind of was a natural evolution from Judaism, right? So they're all following kind of the same God of Abraham mentality. That's how that happened.
It's the Bible 2.0 Arabic version.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Alvina, if you reflect on your time as a JW, was there also this element of fear? Because I'm not exactly sure if I got this right, but apparently the JWs have got this doctrine where Armageddon is imminent. It's just around the corner, and those who don't get on the train to heaven are going to be left behind, and it's not going to be a pretty sight, apparently. So, was there also this element of fear built into the religion that you can remember?
Well, then that's a great question. That's where the Jehovah's Witness were able to get us, because we did have a fear of like hell or anything like that, because we believed when people died, they just slept forever, and then others would be resurrected for paradise earth, and only 144,000 would go to heaven. So the rest of us were just looking forward to another Eden on earth. So the fear aspect would be just, I guess, general because of the Armageddon bit. You don't want to die forever. I think humans are just afraid to be forgotten or die, so everyone wants to be immortal in some way. But it's literally a trauma bond. It's an abusive relationship where you're expecting these highs, these rewards, so you stay there for the lows, for the suffering, and that's why most of the poorest countries are the most religious. So yeah, Jehovah's Witness were very wise in that. There was no fear of hell or burning.
Right.
So, yeah.
But Alvina, although there's no fear of hell, because I know that the JWs adhere to the principle of annihilation. So if us non-believers, we won't burn in hell. We'll just sort of disappear and stop existing. But however, there's this implicit fear. If you don't work hard enough, you will not be one of the chosen 144,000.
No. You don't. Sorry to interrupt you. You don't work hard to be one of the 144,000. They were already chosen. Like they know themselves from the Bible. You can't become one of them. No.
So it doesn't matter what. So you really, literally, you screwed. You just either screwed or not screwed.
Well, but my understanding is that the 144,000 are the select, but other Jehovah's Witnesses can still be resurrected to paradise earth if they're good enough or if they're faithful enough or whatever, right? If they're saved. And also Jehovah's Witnesses, even though they can supplement the lack of the hell fear with other things like disfellowship. Or you know this. So there are other fears in the Jehovah's Witnesses that kind of keep them trapped in it as well, that are just built into the religion.
Right. Interesting. I always, I don't know if you guys, it's a sensitive subject, but there is also this thing called abused wife syndrome or battered wife syndrome or something along those lines where women keep on going back to the men who physically abuse them, and they, will keep on making excuses for this man. Oh, I just, it's all my fault. I didn't prepare the dinner the way that he liked it, or his clothes weren't folded in the right way. So it's okay, it was my fault. And it's the same kind of thing that happens with religion as well. I love to ask this question to believers, how awful does it actually have to get with God before you, stand up and say enough? This is an abusive relationship. If this kind of thing happened to me in my day-to-day life, I would never the fuck stand for it.
Well, that's answered, unfortunately. They've already been indoctrinated into the idea that Job was tested beyond what anyone could imagine going through, and he stayed faithful to God, right? And so this is really a terrible story in the Bible where, the idea is Job suffered, but he stayed faithful, and that's the model of behavior no matter what kind of suffering you're in. So it's already prepared believers or people who've been indoctrinated to not use suffering as the excuse for leaving, because that just makes them weak in faith.
And that's a very that's a very, very bad thing, because it flows even into our corporate world, especially in very religious countries. They expect you to stay even when they don't pay. They tell you, we suffer through it so that we can grow together, yet you don't own equity in the company. It's kind of the same mind manipulation, so that you just stick somewhere not knowing what you actually deserve. A lot of companies do this, and it's unrealistic, because real life is going on, and they expect you to survive on good vibes and inshallah.
Yeah, it's the part of the Stockholm syndrome, Dean, that the common thread we see in all these examples is gaslighting. Like that's the tool, how to make the person believe that they're worthless, that they're terrible, that they need to be saved, that they can't do it without God, that the reason bad things happen is because of you. When religion teaches that, a lot of those corporations that you talked about, they kind of do that too. Alcoholics Anonymous, I mentioned them earlier. So it's not only religion that uses this technique. Even we talk about terrorist insurgents will say that the reason they're doing this is because of what America is doing, or what the UK is doing, or look at, you live in an evil, capitalist empire. Look at what you do. And some of that may be based in truth, so like they can put little pieces of truths in there to convince the person, well, you're right, this is my fault, this is America's fault, that you're killing innocent people is justified because of what I have done, so that's the type of gaslighting that we see in these religious organizations as well.
Very true. Now, there's also this element of community dependence that's built into both these ideas, and from the onset. So the same way that hostages depends on their captors for basic needs, there definitely has to be some kind of reward system built into the relationship for the person that is being held as a as a captive in a hostage situation, in order for them to persist in staying there. And the same thing happens in religion as well. There's a social need, an emotional need, whether it's you get it from your community or your family or whoever around you, and it reinforces that cycle. And we communal animals. We are social animals. We don't survive well by ourselves. If we stick to groups, we've learned through our evolutionary history that if we stick in groups, we survive better. The old person that they put out the tribe was the one that the lions got, so they didn't survive well. But and there's a remarkable similarity between the two.
Yeah, especially when it's like messes with your real world, how you go about the real world. Like, for example, the other day I had a studio session. I was going to record this song, and this producer had agreed to work, just support and all that. But then once he found out I'm an atheist, I don't know how he found out. I think he saw a meme or something, because I'm always posting really problematic memes. He said he couldn't work with an atheist. He was afraid. And I'm like, afraid? If I was, I don't know why people equate atheism to like Illuminati or Antichrist. And I'm like, if I was any of those, would I be here? Like, I'd be rich, I'd be living the life. Come on now, if I sold my soul to some proverbial devil. So when you realize in the community it messes with some things, now I didn't get to release that kind of song. There's another time I got a job as a radio host, and then the same thing. They wanted somebody who would embody Christ, who would be saved. And a lot of people conform just to fit into the community. I even ask myself sometimes, is it worth it? Should I just say like praise God and stuff and just get this thing on the road, So it's really hard to be authentic and have integrity when everybody around you expects you to conform so that they can support things that are not even related to religion.
What was your nationality, Alvina? Where are you
Oh,
from?
I didn't say that. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya.
Okay, Kenya. So
Yeah.
the expectation there is Christianity, and you are publicly not really permitted to have the same opportunities as someone who would be religious if you're an atheist, is essentially what you're
Yes.
saying.
There's a lot of discrimination, stigmatization, and it's not been easy, of course. And I'm a very vocal person, so yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of that, I guess, is driven by where we grow up, the environment that we're in. It's worse in Kenya than it generally is in the United States. I think it's worse in Nigeria and Ghana than it is in Kenya. It might be worse in Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia than it is in Nigeria, you know? So a lot of it is, and this is why I think Islam is probably the religion that's not suffers the most, but is the most I think the percentage of Muslims who suffer from this is the majority. Christianity, it doesn't necessarily have to be the majority. It would certainly be a significant minority. It depends on the denomination and where they're from and, you know, their experience. But certainly in the Islamic world and in places where there's like Sharia law and all of that, that is they're much more locked into it because of the social pressures.
Yeah, definitely. Then next up on our list, we have isolation from alternatives. So hostages are often, purely by the fact that they kidnapped and kept away from other areas, deprived of other alternatives. But religion does this as well, and it does that in a very insidious way by warning you against the ways of the world and keeping you, isolating you from, you shouldn't read those books that are not godly because they're the tools that Satan uses to deceive you and lead you astray. So it's also, a very controlling environment, firstly, but they know deep down in their hearts, they know that if people have alternatives available to them, the insipid broth that they are serving for dinner is going to seem very dull and tasteless. Then people are generally going to go for the tastier morsels that they find in the alternatives. So it's actually very, very clever. It's a very clever ploy that they use to avoid people from dissent and from looking at other opinions.
Then on that point, I love how the irony where they say don't search things on the internet lies, yet the same religious groups have websites, they're using the same internet. Yeah.
Yeah, don't watch those programs, watch our programs.
Those are lies, they're in the internet. What?
So as somebody who grew up in the age before the internet, it's interesting to me.
Me too.
Yes, Dean, sympathies to you. But what I find
me as well, frankly.
Okay. One would never say that, Bryce. So
I'm older than I look.
Air Force obviously did you good, maybe I should join the Air Force. It seems to make one look younger.
He drank the blood of a baby, that's why he looks so young.
Okay. But what I find interesting, and that I never thought about this before I deconstructed, is that I never thought of my religion as highly controlling. So I mean, I grew up in it and I really never experienced it as controlling. But when I look back now, I had such ideas about who to marry, who to have relationships with. So when I fell in love with somebody and I found out, well, I knew that they were not in the same church that I was in, I sort of kept my emotions in check, and I saw that as a problem. I'm lucky that I've married. I did in the end fall in love with somebody who was in the same church that I was. Now we both deconverted. But it's so interesting how subtle these forms of manipulation can be. And that's what I think that's what makes religion more dangerous than an actual kidnapper, because when you are free and you captured and you taken, you know that you're a captive, and there's a dynamic where you have to sort of fight for survival. But when you grow up in a religion, you never question it. You accept that these are this space that I'm being held captive in. If that's all you know, then you don't think of that as a confining environment, because that's all you know. And I think that's what makes religion so insidious, in terms of this whole misplaced abuse, and it's this really unhealthy situation.
Yeah.
I have something to add to that after you read the thing about misplaced loyalty, Dean.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, Tasha, what you said reminded me of a caged bird. You know, when a bird is raised in a cage, even if you open the door, it will not leave. You know, it will consider that cage will be like a safe space for that bird, and it takes weeks and weeks of coaxing and treat feeding and, you know, scratching the bird's head and whatever, in order to coax them to actually feel safe enough to leave that thing. And religion has exactly the same effect on our minds. You know, it teaches us that this is the place where we will be safe, and, you know, we don't learn anything else. So the bird doesn't know what it's like to be outside of the cage, doesn't even consider it an option. And then the second we go through trauma. It's like a traumatic experience for the majority of us. But yes, let's. Sorry, I just want to move us along, because I think we've still got a couple to go through, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time as well. Misplaced loyalty. This is a very big one where, you know, I've seen so many videos on YouTube where we have these African pastors who do the most despicable, horrendous things to their congregants, from physical to mental abuse, and the list goes on. And the most ardent supporters are those being abused. So, you know, just as hostages might develop a sense of loyalty to their captors, believers go through the same process where they develop a deep loyalty to their religious community, or the figure of God, or the person in charge of the church. And even when they experience harm, or you know, when it conflicts with their inner moral compass, they will still make excuses and tap dance around it, and, oh, that was long ago and far away, and things are different now, and, you know, a day to us is a day to the Lord is like 1,000 years to men, you know. And it's like all of these different items. Hit it, Bryce.
Yeah, so what you just said reminds me of something that's not a religion, but definitely cult-like. And, you know, I don't want to get political. I know that's not the point of this, but it just, because the parallel is so striking to me. We have something in the United States known as the MAGA movement, or the Make America Great movement. And this is basically something that former President Donald Trump came up with as a slogan for people to rally behind his political campaign. But since then, and it's been like 7 or 8 years now, it has developed really into a cult, because everything that you just described, Dean, is how people who are affiliated with this movement behave towards the cult leader, which is Donald Trump. You know, they make excuses for his behavior, all of the values that they claim to stand for, family values, Christianity. Donald Trump represents none of this. And when you point that out, they make excuses like, oh, well, he's just a man, but he's fighting for our rights. Or he cheated on his wife with a porn star. Oh, that was the past. That's not the same as today. Like we're all sinners. And it's just one excuse after the next. When it's plain as day, this man is not a Christian, has never been a Christian, does not have Christianity in mind at all, but he's going to use Christians, and you guys have bought it. They have transformed their religious thinking from being one worshiping Christ to one worshiping Trump. MAGA is a cult.
So Bryce, I know this is not a political show, but I was thinking today, because we have elections on the 29th of May in South Africa. So there are election adverts on all the light posts. They're all over the place. And as I was driving from Worcester to Brackenfell, where I am tonight, I looked at all these political parties advertising whatever they're advertising. And I think, though this is not a political discussion, I think that politics has co-opted all the principles of the three major religions, the monotheistic religions. Because what you said now is absolutely important in that there's this misplaced loyalty where you will create any excuse for the party or the group that you choose to adhere to. And it begins by being taught that when bad things happen, it's the devil, and it's because God has an ultimate plan with it. So even when bad things happen, it's not God's fault. He will make it turn out to the best for you. And when good things happen, it's God, So now every single political party, and I think there are some, Dean, help me. I think, 49?
It's more than, I think it's just close to 50. I'm not sure.
Something like that, yes. Yeah. And every single one of them use the church to woo people. And I think that's really important, that we realize that this misplaced loyalty is extremely dangerous. Yeah. And I can be loyal to my spouse or friends or an organization without giving up all my powers of critical thinking.
Exactly.
I can acknowledge that these are human organizations.
This is the thing, Tersia, is that religion has hijacked morality in a certain sense. So I'm not sure if it's the same in Kenya, Alvina, but if a politician here does not say that he is a man of God or a man of Allah or whatever, like people will never vote for them because they don't trust them. They think that it's
true.
That's the same in the United States as well. That might be difficult for some people to believe, but think about it. How many presidents of the United States have you ever heard of that were not Christian?
No, and even if they were closet atheists.
Yeah.
Even if they were closet atheists, there's only been two. But by the way, it's not just Christianity. You have to be a Protestant 90% of the time. There's only ever been two Catholic presidents in U.S. history: John F. Kennedy and Biden, right? Yeah. And that was a huge deal because that's not the culture of the United States. We are a Protestant nation, And so the idea of not being a Christian at all, that's not fathomable. Even atheists and non-religious people, because I think I've seen studies that were done on this. I can't quote them right now, but it turns out even they are more likely to vote for someone who identifies as Christian than Muslim or even a non-believer. So it's just so ingrained in our politics that's even though it's against the Constitution and it's against what our country, separation of church and state, which is enshrined. At the same time, culturally, you have to be a Christian, or at least you have to present that way.
So, guys, it seems that our entire Western culture has been kidnapped by Christianity.
True, facts. And even our current president is the same thing. The economy is going down to the ground, but everyone is still like, because he's a man of God. This must be happening for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? The reason is we're being foolish, guys. Come on.
Yeah, Maya just made a great point talking about Vivek Ramaswamy. The reason he didn't get the Republican nomination is largely because, one, he's brown, and two, he's not Christian. He was saying all of the same things that Trump was saying, which they claim to love. He's their hero, but they were never going to vote for Vivek Ramaswamy. He's not one of us.
He's not. Yep.
Right. Next up, we are almost at the end to this, so just bear with us for a few more minutes, guys. But this is very interesting. Is the way that things are rationalized to be palatable in both of these situations is rather striking if you look at it from an outsider's perspective. In Stockholm Syndrome, harmful or dangerous conditions will be rationalized, minimized, and exactly the same thing happens in a religious context. The followers will do the same with teachings that are, for example, misogynistic, homophobic, ethnocentric, otherwise problematic. So, you can simply look at the issue of slavery and how
it's not slavery; it's indentured servitude.
But the slaves had it well.
It wasn't the same slavery as we had.
It wasn't cattle slavery.
It was a nice, happy, friendly kind of slavery.
The worst example, I don't know if you've seen, if you've been following this, but Alex O'Connor has been he interviewed William Lane Craig on the Canaanite genocide that God ordered. And that's the ultimate example, because William Lane Craig and other apologists, they reason, killing women and children and old people is actually good because those children that the Israelites, those Canaanite babies that the Israelites were ordered to kill by God, that was actually a good thing because that prevented them from becoming grown-ups who prayed to false gods. So that's why it's actually a good thing to kill those Canaanite babies, So if that's at the ultimate
it turns me cold, and I want to look those people who say despicable shit like that, your religion turns me cold. Take it and fuck off.
And by the way, for anyone who's looking to defeat that biblically, the argument seems to work to them, but it actually doesn't work because there are places in the Bible where Moses orders the men to take the virgin girls for themselves and to kill all the boys or any of the girls who had sex with a man. So if you can take the virgin girls for yourselves, clearly the fact that they were once part of this heathen nation doesn't mean that they're going to worship gods. They're now going to become your people. If you can do it with the girls, why can't you do it with the boys? If you can do it with the the teenage girls, why can't you do it with the infant girls? If you could do it with young people, why can't you do it with all? But so it just doesn't work. It's just a stupid excuse.
Yeah, this is why I still I keep religiously posting anti-religious memes because somebody has to call this shit out. Because no.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. Amen, my sister. Right, and then there's this issue of the eternal soul. It's God is the mob boss that's running a protection racket and saying, it's a nice soul that you have there. It would be a pity if something happened to it. And all for the small price of 10% of your income, your Sunday mornings, and you can be safe.
Yeah, Matt Dillahunty does a great analogy with this, with the mob boss, where he's like, we can protect you from this stuff, but you got to keep making the payments, And so that's kind of the same idea as what you're talking about there.
Yeah, so it basically goes that the threat of losing your eternal soul is the same as a psychological captivity. So this compels people to doctrines out of fear, rather than out of love or understanding for these doctrines. And we were talking about this it's really it's a sick kind of love if it is based in fear. You know, I don't even know if you can base love in fear. You know, because it doesn't compute in my brain. I don't
It
know
doesn't
what you
compute
guys-
in anyone's. It doesn't work. You know, that's not how love happens. You know,
Yeah.
love is an emotion. Love is oxytocin and serotonin, and you know, there's the love drugs, the love hormones that our body produces in response to certain stimuli, which are things we value. That it's all related around things that we value. You know, you don't. People would prefer not to fear than to fear. Fear is a negative emotion that people generally don't like. It's necessary for survival, but it's not something that you enjoy. And usually you don't love the things you feel. Like, name something that you fear that you would also say you love besides God.
Bryce, I feel it's like being an addict. You're like high on this drug. You know that it's going to affect you negatively, but you keep craving the highs. So the lows don't seem as low because that's how it feels, though.
Mm.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's the battered wife going back for another beating.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Then we have the promise of ultimate justice. You know, like how can there be any justice in the lives of you atheists when people can commit murder and get away with it? And you know, where's the justice in that? We know that when they eventually end up at the pearly gates, that God's going to judge them, and then, you know, the shit's going to get real then, you know. So
This one is big. Go ahead, Tersia.
No, you go first, Bryce.
Well, I was going to say this one is big because it's a little bit of a divergence from the everything else we talked about is related to, you know, fears and negativity. This one is something that affects, I think, a lot of religious people, in that it's not so much about fear, it's about the disappointment of injustice or a lack of justice. You know, religion is used as a crutch for a lot of people. It gives them hope for something in the future. You know, there's a lot of people who are religious because they think that they're going to see their daughter in heaven who passed away as a child from some disease. You know, that's not right. That's not fair. They would be depressed by the thought of never having to see, you know, their loved ones again in heaven or whatever. And then that extends to thinking about all of the injustices that happen to children around the world, to innocent people. There must be some reward for that. Good people have to be rewarded in the end, and bad people have to be punished. That's something that people have pre-decided because it makes them feel better. And religion is the thing that suggests that. You know, there's no evidence that that happens in real life. In real life, life is unfair and the world sucks. Sometimes bad people get rewarded, sometimes good people don't. But that's not acceptable to a lot of people. And religion kind of, the idea of it is to sort of say, okay, well, they'll pay for it in the afterlife, or they'll be rewarded in the afterlife so that justice is done.
But this is such a it's a primal instinct that we have, is this need for justice and fairness. They had this experiment where they had a group of capuchin monkeys in a cage, and the guy kept on giving he had two different types of treats. The one type of treat was like a very sweet, sugary one, and the other one was like a bland, fibrous biscuit.
It was a grape and a cucumber. It was
yeah, you're right.
Yes, Frans de Waal, who passed away recently. And just on the topic, sorry, I'm interrupting, but I feel we need to do a shout out here to Dan Dennett, who departed yesterday. He passed yesterday, and Frans de Waal. But sorry, Dean, it was grapes and cucumbers. And
Grapes
I'm
and
dying to get on into this topic.
So again, is that they have an innate sense of fairness and justice. It's not something that you can cast your eyes up to the sky and expect your morality to rain like teardrops from God. It's something that's innate in us. And when it comes to this promise of justice, again, with the kidnapping situation, you'll find that people will comply because ultimately they feel that compliance will lead to release. And the same thing happens in religious as well, where the only thing is the release is paradise in the sky with 72 virgins, or depending on your flavor of the Abrahamic religion that you subscribe to, you might be, in there being a choir boy for the rest of your eternity, or, very interesting. Why?
Well, I will just quickly say, to follow up on that this is something that applies to a number of religions. Islam, it definitely applies to. Hinduism as well. This idea of divine justice. Christianity fails here. And a lot of people don't realize this, because Christianity is not about justice at all.
Yep.
Christianity is about the free gift of salvation, regardless of what you've done. You could have been the worst person on earth. As long as you are a believer in the end, that's what matters. That's why Anne Frank goes to hell and Hitler goes to heaven.
Jeffrey Dahmer is sitting in
Dahmer goes, yeah. So is that justice? Did they get what they deserved in the end?
Bryce, it depends on which branch or brand of Christianity
it does.
you adhere to.
Right.
So, I mean, I think there are more than 30,000 brands of Christianity. So it just depends, you can't make a blanket statement.
Yeah, no, I can't make it. You're right. I cannot make a blanket statement, but the majority of certainly Christian fundamentalism and Catholicism and the biggest denominations, they have this idea that salvation is by grace. Catholicism throws in works as well, but
and let's not forget that God in Genesis, when Rebecca was pregnant with the twins Jacob and Esau, while they were still in her womb, she felt them kicking and apparently fighting with one another. And God said, I hated Esau even before he was born, and Jacob I loved. So there is no justice in Christianity. I mean, there is just no justice in Christianity.
Right.
And I could just wind up on that point. It reminds me of these interviews I was seeing of former criminals, and apparently they're talking to a friend of mine who's now doing a YouTube thing, and they were saying they're reformed. So they weren't arrested, and they were speaking very boldly and publicly and proudly about the people they'd killed, the people they'd stabbed, but they're but now that, we're reformed, we found God. And everyone in the comments was like, no, they still need to pay for the crimes that they did. How are they just let go just because they found God or they got reformed? They didn't even look remorseful, and they were just let go like that just because they found God. So yeah, there is no justice. There are many people who were killed by them, and they'll never feel that peace, and there's nothing they can do about it.
It's amazing how people always find religion in politics and in prison. Because it's the two environments where it's supposed to give you some clout, some afterlife clout. Right, the final one, hostages. This transformation of beliefs to fit the narrative. We'll find that hostages adopt the beliefs and behaviors of their captives. Similarly, believers will transform their interpretations of scripture. They'll have these religious experiences. I mean, people are taught to pray in tongues. It's not something that just happens. It's a case of monkey see, monkey do. And that aligns with the expectations of these religious communities, especially when it conflicts with prior understandings and senses of morality. It's weird how religion takes people and just creates a tabula rasa. They are clean for the Lord washes away all of that sin, all of that hooking you did on the street corner. The Lord washes it away. So you're good to go with a new personality now, and it's strange. It's strange how that follows religion around. It's supposed to be this transformative tool that changes people's lives, that gets people off drugs, that gets people off alcohol. And same thing happens with the hostages. They will adopt started, if the captor is, for example, member of a specific political affiliation or religious affiliation, the people who are in that control group will also start to eventually pick up those behaviors, resonate with those ideologies. It's very, very eerie and creepy how that works.
But it's perfectly natural. And the difference is religious people will say, look at how Christianity turned around so-and-so's life. Or Muslims might say, look at what Islam has done for this person who's in prison. They'll say things like, but it's a completely naturalistic expectation for that to happen. There's nothing supernatural going on. It's not divine intervention that's causing people to do that. It's gaslighting and manipulating and brainwashing. That's what the indoctrination process does. That's the natural
I
end.
just want to say, Bryce, it doesn't even have to be that negatively insidious. So it can actually. So I live in the Western Cape, and Dean will know. In the Western Cape, the vowel e is pronounced as ek, whereas in the rest of the country, in Afrikaans, it's just different pronunciations. And I grew up not in this area, but I now speak like the people that I hear speaking every day. I've subconsciously or consciously, I don't know, I've changed my pronunciation of certain vowels to fit in with the people that I mix with every day. And it's a human attribute that can be neutral or positive or negative. And as a teacher, I see this all the time, where you have one child, an older child perhaps, with a way. At the moment, I have a situation, it's not serious, it's just a way of expressing themselves. And the younger children follow the older ones. And in the way they use their voices, and the way they intone their sentences. And it's a human thing. It's an attribute of our species as social animals. So it doesn't even have to be as insidious and as negative. It's just that religion has succeeded to such an extent to co-opt, I want to use the word hijack, all our best and our worst and our most neutral attributes as a social species. And that's why we need programs like these to show people what humans are like, how fallible we are, how many thinking errors we make, that we are not the crown of creation. We are just another social species, and we just so happen to develop language that enables us to cooperate in ways that other species can't. And we can use it to our detriment, or we can use it to the advantage of ourselves and the rest of the planet and the species and the ecosystems that we share the space with. And I think that is what I would like to say in closing from me as Tersia, who's the director of Kruisvlei. You don't have to be a hostage. You understand who you are as a human being and connect with all the other human beings and living creatures and non-living elements of the world, and understand it and seek to understand it better and work against the detrimental effects and work towards the positive effects, because it depends on how we steer things.
The last thing I want to say before we close out is fear of the Lord is not the beginning of wisdom, as recorded in the book of Proverbs. Skepticism is the beginning of wisdom. Critical thinking is the beginning of wisdom. These are things that Christianity eschews, that Islam eschews. Faith is the opposite of skepticism. And so if you're using faith or fear of the Lord, you are not being led towards wisdom. You are stuck in an indoctrinated way of thinking.
Sorry, Alvina, I have to say this. If you haven't seen the film Strictly Ballroom, it's an old Australian movie from the 1990s. And So if you haven't watched it, please watch it. It's brilliant. There's a quote from that movie. It's actually one of my life mottos. A life lived in fear is a life half lived.
Yeah.
And anything or anybody that has to use fear to contain you or to manage you, get out of there. A life lived in fear, especially fear of a supernatural being that doesn't exist, is a life half lived.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to add on that last point. I think also, generally speaking, what happens to all of us as humans, the way we have biases, it's an element of confirmation bias, because now you've gotten into this religion and there are these scriptures telling you certain things are supposed to happen in certain ways. So when you see that in reality, you only get attracted to those experiences or those situations that further affirm what you've been told. It's, yes, you're going to Rome and doing what Romans do, but you're only seeing the situations that are further making you, double down on whatever belief you have. Like, I don't know, you guys have heard of that red car theory. Moment you notice a red car, you'll just start noticing red cars everywhere.
Yeah.
And even if there are other cars, so it's the same way with religious people. You ask them to show you proof and they tell you, God showed up in my life because of ABC. Yet that's not really proof. It's a subjective experience. Because of that bias, it shows them. The way you were saying, Tersia, it's not negative or positive. It depends on what you're looking for, and that's what you find. So for us, when you're seeking out the information and deconstruction, we come across also each other, and we're able to live without that fear, without questioning anything, without being afraid to question things. Yeah.
Amazing, guys. We've run over time, so I just want to be mindful of the production team's time as well. So thank you very much for being so incredibly generous and kind with your time, and for sharing your opinions with us today. I can talk to you guys forever by the way that I feel. Yes, so that last slide as well, I just want to remind everybody in the audience, please go and sin as much as you want, because we do not want the Lord our God to have died in vain, because Jesus died for all of your sins. So if you don't sin, what was the point of the crucifixion? So go and indulge, be a human being, take life, taste it, savor every minute, and sin all you want. And we will see you guys again some other Saturday evening to have these conversations. We bid you adieu. Take care and farewell.